Hey guys, what if I told you that I had a 2.9 science GPA, a 32nd percentile MCAT, it was a 22, which is now about a 500, and I only had an 8% chance of getting into medical school according to AAMC matriculant data. Would you believe that I made it and I am now a double board certified ICU doctor serving in COVID-19 critical care units across the United States, working on the front lines, helping patients that are in need? And I've had a really rough beginning to my pre-med story. I'm Dr. Khan, and my pre-med journey has been not one that you would expect. A lot of people told me to switch careers, especially my pre-med advisor. And I was that student in high school that had a 4.2. I got into college as a biology major and I was just ready to take off. And then I realized I wasn't prepared for the rigors of college. I got two B's and two C's my freshman year, both semesters, and started off my pre-med journey with a 2.5 GPA. So talk about killing your cumulative GPA and your chances. But I continued to push because I knew that I had to make it. I didn't always have the most cush upbringing, and that's because my parents immigrated here in 1968 from India and Pakistan. And so I'm a first generation South Asian kid. And while my parents loved me and they supported me, I wasn't given the type of mentors that other students might have had that were able to help them navigate applying to medical schools, applying to graduate schools, even college in the United States. And so that's why I'm so passionate about talking directly to non-traditional students who might be immigrants, who might be first generation kids like myself, come from other minority marginalized groups, the Latinx community, the Black community, and even the LGBTQ community. Oftentimes we just don't have mentors and supporters who really believe that we can make it through. There's also a lot of implicit bias in our society. And so oftentimes, while we have well-meaning pre-med advisors, they might not see us as doctors. We don't look like a doctor. Doctors are typically seen as middle-aged white men. And so I had a lot to combat throughout my pre-med journey. But what I learned to do was to really tell my story. And I think telling your story is one of the most important pieces to moving your journey from being just a pre-med to really fully embodying being a future doctor. That's when you kind of solidify that this is going to be inevitable. I am going to be a doctor just by relabeling yourself as a pre-med to labeling yourself as a future doctor. And so that's when I created the Future Doctor Formula. And I'm super excited to also pair up with such an amazing company like Magoosh, founded by men of color in Berkeley, California, with the same mission that I have. My mission is to increase the diversity of healthcare leaders for the United States in this country. I want to see our doctors look like our patients. Our patient population is becoming increasingly diverse. And what that means is that our physician cohort really needs to match that to meet the needs of this growing diverse population. I really started to do this when I started my blog, thefemaledoc.com. And very specifically, it was for women in medicine at the time because I was told no 1,000 times and that maybe I should pick another career to have a family. I mean, that was the underlying tone that I got constantly in the pre-med community, whether it was intentional or unintentional. It was still hurtful to hear. And I was very lucky that I had supportive parents at home, but not everyone has super supportive parents. Sometimes that type of pressure even comes from our own family members, our own households. Sometimes when I would go to the mosque, that would be the question on everyone's tongue was, hey, when are you getting married? When all I was focused on was trying to see how I could actually help people, I could help patients, because I wanted to be a future doctor. And that's not always easy to navigate, but I think what it does for future doctors in the same position that I am is that it builds a lot of resilience, and it builds, quite frankly, a hustle. And both of those qualities are exactly what will make you the most amazing physician. I get compliments from my patients all the time about my bedside manner, the way that I connect with people. And it's because I understand what it is to be in a hardship position. I understand what it is to have to dig deep to find that resilience. And so when you find that and you turn it into one of your strengths, and then you tell that in your application, you tell your story in that particular way, then that's how you really, truly end up shining. Three of the biggest struggles that I think non-traditional applicants face, specifically coming from minority groups, are that you just don't have a mentor. And just the logistics of applying can be really challenging. And that's one of the things that I really, really try to focus in my future doctor formulary program, is to be able to tell that story so that you can play off of your strengths, so that you know all the logistics of the application process. The second biggest factor is that you have discouraging pre-med advisors. But pre-med advisors don't know you. They don't know your passion. They don't know who you are truly. They're well-meaning, and sometimes they typically just go off of scores. But those statistics don't always play out. I only had an 8% chance of getting into medical school, but I decided that it was my decision to take that risk. It wasn't their decision. I wanted to apply with an 8% chance anyways. And that's what's the beauty of data. Take that data, figure out your chances of getting into medical school. I have a quiz that you can take at thefemaledoc.com/premed quiz. Really simple, 30 seconds. And take that data and those numbers and use it to empower yourself. And if you are scoring really low on your MCAT, take full advantage of a program like Magoosh. Magoosh has a ton of videos and someone on standby to be able to help you with your questions. And I really wish that when I was applying to medical school that there was a program like this, because my parents and I ended up spending about $3,000 on a fancy MCAT prep program that's still around. So I'm sure you can guess which one it is. There's just a few of them out there that are really that costly. But the problem with me was that I didn't have the self-discipline and I didn't have the study skills to really be able to use the tools that they were giving me, because the tools weren't catered to who I was as a student, as a minority student. And I really didn't know what to do with all of that material. Everyone else seemed to be going through it just fine. And I started playing this comparison game that maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't really meant to be there. Maybe I shouldn't be taking this test. And I really didn't do that great on the MCATs. And I really wish that I had something like Magoosh to be able to help me. And I'm so happy that I've partnered with them to be able to bring you a fully comprehensive MCAT prep program. One of the biggest things that was missing was that strategy and that accountability. And coming from a person of color, that's not what society shapes us to really lean into. That's not something that we're always taught, because a lot of that is taught from generation to generation. And, my parents were just trying to figure everything out themselves in this country and how to navigate that. And the test taking system, the educational system, is just so different. So you have to learn these different skills that maybe your parents didn't learn. Same thing in your community. Everything is going to be a little bit more challenging in that regard. And I think that some of the strengths of leaning into mentors like myself, or reaching out to people at Magoosh and getting them to help you through this process, is what can really help a minority student, a non-traditional student shine, because we kind of understand those struggles. The third struggle that I think minority students face is really combating a lot of implicit bias. Like I mentioned before, People can be really discouraging of your journey because they just go based on statistics. And statistics don't define you, numbers don't define you. And I graduated medical school with a 3.8 GPA. I went from a 2.9 science GPA to a 3.8 in medical school. And the reason why is I just didn't have a passion for boring organic chemistry. I mean, I don't know anyone who has a passion for boring organic chemistry. But really, what ended up happening was in medical school, I was taking the most amazing and interesting classes like anatomy, physiology. I was learning about the human body. I was learning about pharmacology. I was learning about viruses like COVID-19, coronavirus. It wasn't a strain back then, but I understood and was learning about how viruses affect the body. I mean, that kind of stuff is super interesting. And because I actually had a passion for it, that's when I really started to shine. And I found an intrinsic motivation within myself to really push through. And so, other science professors that might tell you, hey, English is your second language. You're really going to struggle through this. Don't let them label you like that. That's not what this system is about. And it's not going to define you. Only you can define yourself. If you're going through the hardships that I went through, that's okay because it's only going to make you a stronger and better doctor. And that's what's going to make you shine throughout medical school, your residency program. You're going to connect with your patients on a different level. So, where can a non traditional pre med student who really feels lonely, isolated, maybe has been out of college for a while, find really good support? Well, number one, definitely don't go onto online forums because they are scary and they're just going to make you compare yourself to other people that you don't know anything about. Remember, social media, everyone kind of posts the best of their lives and they might talk about certain scores or different GPAs, but that's not you. That's not what makes you special. What makes you special is who you are in your journey. And I've built a really amazing community with the Future Doctor formula. And the students in there just connect. And there's a whole peer matching process, which has been so amazing to see and watch because you end up with, two non-traditional students. One's a mom, one's a clinical laboratory specialist. They've been on this journey for 4 years and they've been struggling and they found each other in the program because they were matched up with our algorithm. And now they meet once a week and they're helping each other through the program. They're helping each other write their essays. They're reviewing each other's essays and how they interview. And that's the kind of stuff that you really want to find. You really want to find a community that looks like you, where you feel comfortable enough to talk about your downfalls because the other person in that community has also had a downfall. And then you guys can learn from each other and kind of play off of that. And I've created the same thing with Magoosh. We've created a whole MCAT prep community where you guys will learn the same type of behavioral psychology techniques and test taking strategies. And then you can discuss it on Saturdays and Sundays when you're doing your practice tests through our Zoom calls. And this way you get accountability and you get it from someone that you know, like, and trust. And that's because they have the same story as you. They have very similar stories. First generation kids, we're kind of a unique group. Same thing with immigrants, anyone that's been oppressed in American society really has to overcome a lot of hurdles. It's not always easy, and it's not always easy to get along and not play that comparison game with someone who hasn't had to struggle as much as you. Oftentimes you can find yourself feeling a little bit jealous. And jealousy is a normal human emotion. We all kind of go through that. Scrolling through Instagram definitely doesn't help, but it shouldn't define how you march through this really difficult period of trying to get into medical school. It doesn't have to be hard. It can be easy. If you find that really, really select group of people that are just like you. And that's one of the big motivating factors for why I created Future Doctor Formula and I've paired with Magoosh is because we understand that. I've gone through that. We know how difficult it is to find people that will help you through this journey, even if they're in the same spot as you. You know, the pre-med community can be really cutthroat, and there's a lot of comparisons and there's a lot of hiding. You don't want to give the same test taking strategies because you don't want to see someone else shine because you think that that's going to take away from you. But imagine coming from a community of marginalized people. Like, we all just want to see each other shine. We're all trying to help each other out because we know that we're not competing against each other. What we're doing is we're building a community so that we can increase the diversity of healthcare leaders. We're all on a mission, and that mission is bigger than us. And you want to align yourself with people like that because then you're always going to constantly get that really great support that you wouldn't find, let's say, at your university in a class full of 500 people. Some of the other resources that I really recommend when you're preparing for the MCAT is to actually take some time to learn how to read faster and memorize more. There's a lot of behavioral psychology techniques that can actually help, and it's a big brain hack. These techniques are amazing. A lot of students in my program have double, tripled, quadrupled their reading speed just by using their innate human nature. Everyone has the same brain. It just needs to be trained. You know, speed readers have only trained their brain. We all have the same brain. So why can't you be a speed reader? You can be a speed reader without losing comprehension. It's actually scientifically possible, but it's just something that no one talks about. It's sort of this secret elite club that knows about it. But because I have a background in psychology, I'm able to really teach that. And a lot of students have found that it's helped tremendously on the cars section. And these are the small little things that can really help when you have a community and you're practicing together and you're learning these techniques through a mentor, someone like me, any mentor who has gone through the process and who understands that. I've also been behind the scenes reviewing applications. I've taken the MCAT. I've had all of this experience. I've gone through the entire process and I'm a practicing physician now. And so I know how important these little brain hacks can be because there's so much to know as a physician and you have to be able to pivot really quickly. And it's not that someone has to work grueling hours all the time or that someone just innately has these magical memorizing talents. There's a blend of everything and everyone. And because we all have the same human brain, you just pair psychology, behavioral techniques, and match them with these study skills and just create repetitions and patterns in those studied skills. It's not the kind of stuff that you're going to learn on YouTube. It's very special, very unique to my mentorship program. And I've really seen a lot of success. And it's something that a lot of mentors maybe aren't teaching, but you want to find an experienced mentor who's gone through the process to be able to help guide you in your entire pre-med journey, whether it's from test taking experts like at Magoosh or a mentor like myself in the Future Doctor Formula program. Whatever works for you and your learning style is what's going to work best. Now, let's say you're a student who hasn't fully started jumping into the MCAT. You might be a sophomore. You're just starting your pre-med journey, but you're further enough into it where you're starting to figure out, hey, I need to get started on some stuff and get my application prepared now so that I'm ahead of the game before it's too late. And my biggest tip, listen very carefully, my biggest tip is to continue to network and maintain relationships with your science professors, your undergraduate professors who really touched you. And the reason why is these relationships are actually super important. In 2011, AAMC did a survey study asking admission committee members what was the most important part of the application process. Would you believe that after your MCAT, science GPA, and cumulative GPA, the next important piece of your application was your letter of recommendation. Most people think it's the personal statement, but I think most students think it's the personal statement because they think that they have no control over how a letter of recommendation can be written because they're not the ones writing it, and they waive their right to see and view this letter. And so if you're getting bad grades in your science classes, kind of like I was, you sort of feel like you don't have any control over this process. But there are so many very specific networking techniques that you can use to reestablish relationships with your professors, even if you've been out of university for a long time, even if you didn't do that great in that science class. And I know that from experience. I have kept in touch with several of my undergraduate professors. Even to this day, I have been, I have graduated almost 20 years ago from college, and I still keep in touch with them. And it's because I know how important those relationships are. And it doesn't have to be intimidating. It's not a big process. It's not time consuming. It's just very simple relationships. You know, young adults, especially those of us who come from marginalized backgrounds, aren't really taught this. We're not taught how to hustle and communicate and make sure that we're maintaining relationships throughout young adulthood. But that's the biggest tip that I have for students who are starting out early, who aren't studying for the MCAT yet, who haven't really dipped into that full application process yet. This is the biggest technique that you can use, is to just start networking, talking to your professors, and warming up those relationships so that you can get that really strong letter of recommendation in the future.